Hello and welcome to Film Companion South. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Drishyam 2, directed by Jeethu Joseph and starring Mohanlal and Meena as George, Kuti and Rani as we know them from the first film, a genuine blockbuster of our time. Now, when we get to Drishyam 2, the world of George Kuti has changed. The man himself has moved up in life. He was a cable operator in the first film. Now he owns a theatre. But then Rani, the wife, she keeps saying that their lives have changed in many ways too. George Kuti himself has changed. He wants to make a movie. He wants to become a producer. And this has caused in Rani losing her peace of mind. And she says their younger daughter has changed. And coming back to that peace of mind point, which Rani said, she's lost her peace of mind also because she hasn't forgotten the events of 6 years ago. Because that night changed her life forever. Her peace of mind was shattered forever. Now the townspeople are gossiping about George Kuti's family. They think that he killed the boy, that he is guilty, and that the boy was innocent. Now Rani doesn't know much about this because she doesn't get out much except to go to church, but George Kuti knows and he's always vigilant. Beneath that facade of his, he's always vigilant. Now the police think so too, which is why they haven't stopped digging into the case. Murali Gopi takes over the cop nemesis role from Asha Sarath in the first film. Now all movie reviews have some level of spoilers, otherwise you cannot even talk about the plot, for crying out loud. But why I'm reiterating this very basic fact, this very obvious fact, is that Drishyam 2, like its predecessor, is utterly reliant on your knowing as little about it as possible. So if you don't want spoilers, and I'm going to keep them as minimal as possible, just know that Mohanlal and Meena are as lovely as they were in the first film together, and this is a very worthy sequel. Okay, for those of you who are still watching, let's talk about the film's superb structure. Like part 1, it is not a director's movie. It is not something you watch for the cinematic language, say. It is a writer's movie. And what writing it is, which is at some level just basic exposition. It's very simple, scene after scene after scene of exposition. And there are some things that I missed, like the Asha Sarath character. I wish she had come and taken over this case because of some, lingering grief or whatever it is, or a desire to get even. Because right now we are shown that the cops are investigating the case because they feel humiliated that they've not been able to crack it, which kind of, that Asha Sarath character, had she come back with her husband played by Siddiq, it would have lent more moral weight to this case being reopened. But Jeethu Joseph makes you forget all these quibbles, all these small complaints that you have by his jaw-dropping inventions in terms of the sheer plot, which is basically the big things that happen. My jaw just kept dropping at his inventions and his life philosophies, like the neighbor next door who the victim of domestic abuse, or the way Jeethu Joseph weaves in the notion of copyright. Notice how even at a philosophical level, George Kuti's desire to help another man, what seems charitable at first, turns out to be an act of self-preservation. And remember this line from the first film, man is selfish by nature. Another beautiful part about this plot is that George Kuti's problems, a lot of them, are caused by another man who's selfish by nature and another man who wants nothing more than to be with his family. And this is another man who has committed an inadvertent crime. Imagine these parallels. Now they all come together in a very satisfying way, and some viewers may say that the result is not as stomach churning as part 1, but that is because this is not a thriller as such. It is more wrenching at a philosophical level. It exists at a more existential level. By the end, I felt that George Kuti's world is more of a Dostoevskian world. I mean, unlike Crime and Punishment, we don't really delve into the psychology of a criminal all that much. But there are other similarities, like the way the crime is committed in part 1 of the novel and in part 1 of the Drishyam series, and the punishment is meted out in a very abstract way in part 2. And why is it an abstract form of punishment? Because guilt, fear, crippling stress, anxiety, all these things that are as much a part of George Kuti as Raskolnikov, the protagonist of Crime and Punishment, these things can be a worse punishment to live with than just jail. The writing during the climactic portions, again, it kind of treats the two movies of the Drishyam universe, that is part 1 and part 2, as two halves of a man's story. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. It's a superb meta touch, and it feeds into our desire to see the hero always win, even if he loses his soul in the process. In other words, the film is best when we view part 1 and part 2 as part of a whole extended unified universe. At first, when George Kuti says he doesn't want to make an ordinary movie, I mean, he's turned producer, right? When he says he doesn't want to make an ordinary movie, you think he's just talking about the movie he's producing in the context of Drishyam 2, but slowly you realize that he's also talking about the movie in the context of his life. By the closing scene, you realize that Drishyam 2 might have some minor issues, but at least George Kuti has ended up making a movie that can never be bettered. So that's it for now. The full review is up on the Film Companion website. If you like this video, do subscribe to Film Companion South, and see you soon at the movies.